The most dangerous habit you have isn't arrogance. It isn't laziness. It's the one you were praised for as a child. You think being polite makes you respected. It doesn't. It makes you predictable. And predictable men are easy to step over. Let me tell you something uncomfortable right away. Something most motivational videos are too afraid to say. Your biggest reputation problem isn't that people misunderstand you. It's that they understand you perfectly and still don't take you seriously. Pause for a second. Think about the last time someone cut in front of you, at work, in a meeting, in life. They didn't do it because they were evil. They did it because nothing in your behavior suggested there would be consequences. That's the silent language of politeness. This video is not about becoming rude. It's about survival. Because in the real world, politeness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-erasure. And once people learn they can erase you, they never stop. The moment it starts breaking you, I want you to imagine a man named Daniel. Smart, reliable, always helpful. The guy everyone calls when something goes wrong. Daniel never interrupts. He always waits his turn. He apologizes before he speaks, even when he's right. Managers say they love Daniel, but promotions keep passing him by. Why? Because leadership is not assigned to the most agreeable man in the room. It's assigned to the man who looks like he won't fold under pressure. And Daniel folds before the pressure even arrives. Here's the uncomfortable truth most men never hear. Every social environment has predators. Not villains, not monsters, just people who advance by sensing weakness. And weakness is rarely loud. It's usually soft, smiling, accommodating, over-polite. That's where the damage begins. Politeness is a signal, not a virtue. Every behavior you display sends a signal, whether you intend it or not. When you laugh at jokes that disrespect you, you signal tolerance. When you agree too fast, you signal low standards. When you apologize unnecessarily, you signal guilt without a crime. And signals create reputations. Here's the part that stings. People don't treat you based on what you deserve. They treat you based on what you tolerate. Read that again. Your politeness has been training people how to treat you. Every "it's fine," every forced smile, every swallowed objection. You think you're being mature. They think you're manageable. And once someone categorizes you as manageable, your authority quietly dies. The first crack in your image. Let me ask you something, and be honest. How often do you say yes when your body is screaming no? How often do you let small disrespect slide because it's not worth it? How often do you choose comfort now over authority later? That's habit number one, and it's not obvious. It hides behind good intentions. But this habit alone is enough to slowly collapse your reputation. Because reputations don't shatter loudly, they erode quietly. A joke here, a dismissal there, a boundary crossed just this once. Until one day you realize something chilling. No one asks for your opinion anymore. They inform you. No one negotiates with you. They decide for you. And the scariest part, they don't even think they're doing anything wrong. Why this video matters more than you think. This isn't about becoming aggressive. It's about becoming clear. Clear men don't need to raise their voice. They don't need to threaten. Their presence alone sets limits. But polite men, overly polite men, are invisible until they're useful, then discarded. And in the next part, I'm going to expose the first polite habit that is silently teaching people to disrespect you. A habit so common that almost everyone watching this has it. Once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. And that's where things start to change. The fastest way to lose authority is to give it away with a single word. And that word is sorry. Most men don't realize this, but unnecessary apologies are like blood in the water. You say them casually, others hear them strategically. Because an apology is not neutral. It's an admission of fault, even when none exists. And once you repeatedly admit fault, people stop seeing you as an equal. They start seeing you as someone who needs to be managed. The apology reflex. That's killing your image. Let me show you how subtle this is. You walk into a meeting 2 minutes late. You say, "Sorry, I'm late," even though traffic was out of your control. Someone interrupts you mid-sentence. You say, "Sorry, can I just add something?" Someone misunderstands you. You say, "Sorry, I probably didn't explain that well." Do you see the pattern? You are constantly placing yourself below the interaction. You are preloading guilt into conversations where you are not guilty. And here's the dangerous part. The human brain does not analyze apologies deeply. It just registers status. Apologies signal lower status. Confidence signals higher status. This isn't opinion. It's social psychology. A story you'll recognize immediately. There was a man named Marcus. Competent, experienced, quietly intelligent. In meetings, Marcus had good ideas, but he introduced every idea with hesitation. "Sorry, this might not be right, but..." "Sorry if this is obvious." "Sorry, just thinking out loud." What happened? Other men started speaking over him. They repeated his ideas louder and got credit. Not because they were smarter, but because they sounded certain. Marcus wasn't ignored because he was wrong. He was ignored because he sounded unsure of his own worth. And here's the brutal truth. People don't listen to ideas. They listen to certainty. Why apologies feel safe, but are actually dangerous. You apologize because you think it keeps the peace. You think it makes you likable. You think it prevents conflict. But here's what it actually does. It trains people to associate you with hesitation, with self-doubt, with submission. Over time, they stop asking for your input. They stop deferring to you. They stop respecting you, not consciously, instinctively, because authority does not apologize for existing. Read that again. Authority does not apologize for existing. The difference between strength and submission. Let's be clear. This is not about never apologizing. Real strength owns real mistakes. But weak men apologize for space, for time, for breathing. There is a massive difference between "I apologize, I made an error," and "Oh, sorry to bother you." One is responsibility, the other is self-erasure. And most men live in the second category without realizing it. The replacement that changes everything. Here's what confident men do differently. Instead of "Sorry, I'm late," they say, "Thanks for waiting." Instead of "Sorry, can I add something?" they say, "Here's what matters." Instead of "Sorry, I might be wrong," they say, "Here's my perspective." Same politeness, completely different status. One lowers you, the other anchors you. And once you make this shift, people feel it immediately. But here's the catch. When you stop apologizing unnecessarily, some people will become uncomfortable. Why? Because they benefited from your guilt. And in the next part, we're going to expose the second polite habit, the one that makes people comfortable disrespecting you openly. It feels harmless, it feels nice, but it's quietly dismantling your reputation piece by piece. Most men never notice it until it's too late. Every time you laugh at disrespect, your reputation takes a quiet step toward the grave. Not a dramatic fall, not a public collapse, a silent downgrade. And the worst part? The people laughing with you are the ones pushing you down. The smile that signals weakness. Let's talk about a habit so socially accepted that questioning it feels wrong. You get teased in front of others. Someone makes a sharp joke at your expense. It stings, just a little. You laugh, you shrug, you play along. You tell yourself, relax, it's not that serious. But your nervous system heard something else, and so did everyone watching. They heard, this man tolerates being diminished. And once that message lands, it doesn't bounce. Why jokes are never just jokes. Humor is a social weapon, always has been. Men test boundaries through jokes because jokes come with deniability. If you push back, they say, relax, I'm just joking. If you don't push back, they push further next time. This is not theory. This is pattern recognition. A man named Ethan learned this the hard way. Ethan was the good sport, the guy who could take a joke, the guy who laughed things off. At first, the jokes were mild. Then they became personal. Then they became public. What changed? Not the jokes, Ethan's response, or rather his lack of one. The laughter that rewrites your identity. Here's what happens neurologically when you laugh at disrespect. You reduce social tension, but you also reduce your own status. The brain of the person disrespecting you learns something crucial. There is no cost. No cost means repetition. Repetition means normalization. And once disrespect is normalized, you don't get to complain about it later, because from their perspective, you approved it. That's the trap. You think you're being mature. They think you're agreeing with the frame. Why silence would have been better. Here's the twist most men never consider. Silence is stronger than nervous laughter. A calm pause, a neutral stare, no smile, no reaction. That moment forces them to feel the tension instead of you. But laughing absorbs the tension for everyone else at your expense. And once people learn you'll absorb discomfort for the group, they'll keep handing it to you forever. The social hierarchy nobody talks about. Every group has an unspoken hierarchy, not official, but obvious. There's the man who jokes, and the man who is joked about. You don't choose which one you are with words. You choose it with reactions. The man who laughs at himself to avoid conflict becomes entertainment. The man who doesn't rush to smooth things over becomes respected. This doesn't mean aggression. It means gravity. Respected men don't scramble to be liked. They let the room adjust to them. The moment everything shifts, here's the uncomfortable realization. The first time you don't laugh, the room feels awkward. Good. Awkwardness is the cost of reclaiming authority, because authority disrupts comfort before it creates respect. And the men who benefited from your laughter will feel exposed. They'll test you again, harder, which leads directly into the next habit, one that seems generous, even noble, but guarantees people will never value your time. And once your time isn't valued, neither are you. If everyone can access you anytime, no one will ever value you. Availability feels generous. It feels loyal. It feels like being a good man. But in reality, it quietly destroys your leverage, your mystery, and your reputation. Because scarcity, not effort, is what creates value. The invisible cost of being too reachable. Let's talk about a habit that feels productive on the surface. You answer messages immediately. You pick up every call. You rearrange your schedule to help others. You tell yourself, this is how you build trust. But here's the truth most motivational advice skips. Trust without boundaries becomes exploitation. A man named Ryan lived this pattern. Ryan was dependable, always on time, always responsive. If someone needed help, Ryan was there. If someone needed extra effort, Ryan delivered. And yet, when decisions were made without him, when promotions were discussed, when respect was distributed, Ryan was invisible. Why availability signals low value? In economics, anything abundant is cheap. Water is abundant. Gold is scarce. Which one is protected? Your time follows the same rule. When people know you'll always respond, they stop respecting the response. When people know you'll always say yes, they stop appreciating the effort. Your constant availability sends a silent message. My time has no competing priorities. And if you don't protect your time, no one else will. The lie you've been sold about hard work. You were taught that effort earns respect, that grinding harder makes you valuable. That's only half true. Effort earns use, boundaries earn respect. People respect men whose time must be earned, men who are not instantly reachable, men who are selective, not because they're arrogant, but because they're anchored. Ryan learned this too late. By the time he tried to pull back, people were confused. Why aren't you responding? Why are you acting different? Translation: why are you no longer serving us on demand? The psychological shift that changes everything. Here's what happens when you're always available. You become predictable. Predictability kills intrigue, and intrigue is power. Men with authority don't rush. They respond deliberately, not out of ego, out of self-respect. The moment you delay a response without apology, something changes. People lean in. They adjust. They start to accommodate you, and that makes some people uncomfortable. Good. Because comfort was never your goal. Respect was. The fear that keeps you trapped. Let's be honest. You fear that if you stop being available, you'll be forgotten. You fear that saying no will cost you opportunity. You fear that absence equals irrelevance. But the opposite is true. Men who are always present fade into the background. Men who are selectively present become memorable. Presence gains meaning only when absence exists. The line you must draw. Here's the shift. You don't explain your unavailability. You don't apologize for delays. You don't over-justify boundaries. You simply operate on your terms. And when you do that, something strange happens. People begin to mirror your respect for your own time. But not everyone will like it. Some will resist. Some will test you. Some will push harder. Which brings us to the next polite habit. The one that traps men in endless explanations and slowly strips them of authority in every conversation. Once you see it, you'll realize how often you've been sabotaging yourself with your own mouth. The more you explain, the less people believe you. That sounds backwards. But authority often lives in what you don't say, and over-explaining is one of the fastest ways to dismantle it. Why explanations feel safe. You over-explain because you want to be fair, you want to be clear, you want to avoid misunderstanding, so you justify your decisions, you add context, you stack reasons on top of reasons. I couldn't make it because traffic was bad and then my phone died and I had to handle something urgent. But notice what just happened. You turned a simple statement into a defense. And defenses imply accusation even when none was made. The subtle shift from leader to defendant. There was a man named Victor. Victor was competent and respected at first, but whenever his decisions were questioned, he explained them in detail. Every time. He thought transparency built trust. Instead, it trained people to challenge him. Why? Because explanations invite negotiation. The moment you over-explain, you tell the room, my authority is open for debate, and people love debate when it benefits them. Why strong men speak? Simply strong men don't justify. They state, I won't be able to attend. This is the direction we're taking. That doesn't work for me. No apology, no defense, no essay. Not because they're cold, but because they're certain. Certainty closes doors to manipulation, the psychology behind over-explaining. Over-explaining triggers a hidden assumption in others. If he's explaining this much, he must be unsure. And once doubt enters, people probe, they push, they question, they test. You don't lose respect because you're wrong. You lose respect because you appear uncertain. The fear that keeps you talking. You fear being misunderstood. You fear being judged. You fear being seen as unreasonable. So you keep talking. But clarity doesn't come from volume. It comes from finality. And finality is uncomfortable for others, which is exactly why it works. The line that changes everything. Here's the rule. If you don't owe someone an explanation, don't give them one. Silence after a statement is power. It forces others to adjust. And the men who can sit in that silence, they are never overlooked. What comes next is harder, because once you stop over-explaining, people lose their leverage over you. And when leverage disappears, they try a different tactic. They push responsibility onto you. They dump problems in your lap. They expect you to carry weight that isn't yours. Which leads us to the next polite habit, the one that turns capable men into unpaid emotional laborers. It feels noble, it feels supportive, but it will drain you dry. There is a quiet way to lose respect, and it's called carrying weight that was never yours. You think it makes you reliable. They think it makes you responsible for everything. And once that belief sets in, your authority doesn't just weaken, it gets buried under other people's messes. How capable men become convenient men. This habit doesn't start with weakness. It starts with competence. You're the man who can handle things, the man who stays calm, the man who fixes problems, so people bring you theirs. At first, it feels like trust. Then it becomes expectation. Then it becomes entitlement. There was a man named Aaron. Aaron was sharp, focused, capable under pressure. When things went wrong, people looked to him. He stepped in every time, and slowly something shifted. Mistakes stopped being owned by the people who made them. Deadlines stopped being respected. Planning stopped happening. Why plan when Aaron will catch it? Why this destroys your reputation? Here's the brutal truth. The man who fixes everything is never seen as the leader. He's seen as the tool. Leadership assigns responsibility. Submission absorbs it. When you constantly take responsibility for other people's failures, you send a powerful signal. I will carry what you drop. And once people know that, they drop more. The psychological trap. You tell yourself you're being supportive. You tell yourself you're being strong. You tell yourself it's temporary. But the human brain adapts fast. People don't think he's generous. They think he'll handle it. And when things go right, they take credit. When things go wrong, they look at you. Aaron learned this the hard way. One project failed, not because of him, but because of poor planning by others. Guess who got blamed? The man who handled everything. Why saying no feels so dangerous? You fear that refusing responsibility will make you look selfish, uncooperative, difficult. But here's the paradox. Men who never say no are never respected. Men who say no selectively are trusted, because boundaries signal judgment, and judgment is authority. The shift that restores power. Strong men ask one question before taking responsibility. Is this actually mine? If it's not, they don't rescue it. They let consequences land where they belong, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. And clarity forces growth for everyone. The moment people push back. Here's what will happen when you stop carrying others. They'll call you changed. They'll say you're less helpful. They'll test you. That's not a bad sign. That's proof you were being used. And when the tests begin, you'll face the most dangerous polite habit of all, the habit that makes men betray themselves in real time. Just to avoid discomfort, once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere. The fastest way to lose yourself is to keep choosing peace over truth, because peace that costs you your voice is not peace, it's surrender, and surrendered men don't get respected, they get managed. How conflict avoidance becomes self-betrayal. You avoid conflict because you're intelligent, because you see both sides, because you don't want drama, so you stay quiet. You let things slide. You tell yourself it's not worth it. But here's what no one tells you. Every avoided conflict doesn't disappear. It accumulates, it stacks, it hardens, and one day it defines how people see you. There was a man named Noah. Noah hated confrontation. He believed strong men stayed calm and composed, so when someone crossed a line, he ignored it. When someone spoke over him, he stayed quiet. When decisions were made without him, he adapted. Until one day, he realized something terrifying. No one checked with him anymore. They assumed. Why? Conflict is a filter. Conflict isn't chaos. It's a filter. It reveals who respects you and who was only comfortable because you were silent. When you never push back, people assume you can be pushed. And once that assumption locks in, changing it becomes painful, because now asserting yourself feels out of character. That's the trap. The lie about being easygoing. You've been told being easygoing is attractive, that flexibility is maturity, but there's a line. On one side is calm confidence. On the other is erasure. Men who avoid all conflict don't look strong. They look undecided, unanchored, unsafe to follow. Leadership requires friction, not constant fighting, but the willingness to confront. Why people respect men who can say enough. Here's what happens when you finally draw a line. The room goes quiet. People recalibrate. Some will respect you instantly, others will resist, but everyone will notice, because conflict signals self-respect. It says, I am not here to be tolerated. I am here to be counted. And that changes your reputation overnight. The cost of silence. Every time you stay silent to keep peace, you teach people that your discomfort is acceptable. And they remember. They remember it when assigning work, when making decisions, when choosing leaders. Silence doesn't protect you, it exposes you. The moment you step forward, strong men don't seek conflict, but they don't run from it either. They address issues early, calmly, directly, no explosions, no theatrics, just presence. And when you do that consistently, people stop testing you, which brings us to the final polite habit, the one that locks all the others in place, the habit that decides whether you are respected or quietly dismissed. This last one is subtle, almost invisible, and once you remove it, your entire reputation changes. The moment you prioritize being liked, you surrender control of your life, because respect is earned from within, but likability is rented from other people's approval, and rented power can be taken away at any moment. The hidden addiction. No one talks about. Most men don't crave success. They crave acceptance. They want to be seen as good, nice, easy to work with. So they soften their edges. They dilute their opinions. They shrink themselves just enough to fit. There was a man named Lucas. Lucas was well-liked. Everyone enjoyed him, but when difficult decisions were needed, he wasn't consulted. When leadership roles opened, he wasn't considered. Why? Because likability does not equal authority. Why? Respect and likability are not the same. Here's the hard truth. People may like you and still walk all over you. They may smile at you and still ignore your needs. They may praise you and still exclude you from power. Respect creates boundaries. Likability dissolves them. Strong men are not disliked. They're defined. People know where they stand with them. The fear that keeps you small. You fear that if you stop being agreeable, people will leave. Some will. That's not loss. That's filtration. The men who disappear when you stop pleasing them were never allies. They were consumers. And consumers don't build your future. The shift that changes everything. Here's the final rule that ties everything together. You don't need to be harsh. You don't need to be cold. You don't need to dominate. You need to be clear. Clear boundaries, clear standards, clear presence. Clarity creates respect. Who you become after this. When you stop apologizing unnecessarily, stop laughing at disrespect, stop being endlessly available, stop over-explaining, stop carrying others' weight, stop avoiding conflict, and stop chasing approval. Something powerful happens. People listen when you speak. They pause before crossing you. They take your time seriously, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. The final truth. Politeness is not the enemy. Fear is. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of standing alone. But the men who rise are the men who can stand without permission. And once you do, your reputation stops being fragile. It becomes unshakable.